Welcome to Leveraging Leadership, where we unpack the art of business leadership. I'm your host, Emily Sander, Chief of Staff turned Executive Leadership Coach. And this show is all about finding your points of greatest influence and leveraging them to better serve those around you. Today, we are joined by guest Shantel Wilkins. Welcome, Shantel, to Leveraging Leadership.
Well, thank you, Emily. I'm very happy to be here.
And where are you coming at us from?
So Shantel Wilkins, I use she, her pronouns. I am currently in San Antonio, Texas, by way of Austin, Texas.
Okay. And that's a very large state. So I know those two things can be very far apart.
They could. They're actually right up the street from each other, but you're right. It is a very large state.
I was talking to someone and they were like Dallas, Fort Worth and, Austin, all these things and Houston. And I was like, oh, so you could like drive over there. Like, no, that's not an easy drive. It's a large state, but very cool. Very happy to have you. And you're a chief of staff now for DOCN. And I want to get to that story and what that's about and why that's important to you. But I think it's important to understand your backstory a little bit. So we can start there and maybe you can tell us when you noticed or when you were told that you were really good at basketball.
Yes. So it's an interesting journey. So my childhood is not one of the best, right? So there's these things called adverse childhood experiences, which are known as ACEs. And I've probably experienced every single one of them. My mom, a young teen mom, who was in the foster care system from the age of 4 until she aged out at 17. At that point, she found out she was pregnant with me. She experienced everything ghastly that any child could experience in the foster care system at every home she went to. And by the age of 17, she finally found what she thought would be a forever home and a family, but she had to make a choice. Either you keep the child or you stay in this home. So obviously she chose me. That's why I'm sitting here today in front of you. And so for her, that journey was tough. And I think it just led into some things that, impacted my childhood. And then I moved to a town at Round Rock, which is same thing, still in Texas, but, outside of where we were before. And so when we moved there were not people that looked like me in my family, in the neighborhood or the schools. But thankfully there was Coach Powers, Coach Tina Powers. I tell you what, Emily, at age 13, coming out of all of that and trying to figure out a way to just be, it was a struggle. And she saw talent in me. She was a basketball coach and those basketball coaches. She said, you can go more with this talent. And I was like, really? And she's like, yes, give me the opportunity, and I said, okay. And so she did. And she took me to play with the guys. So I played with boys. So my style of basketball was very different from everyone else, my teammates. And so when I graduated from middle school, I went on to high school. I ended up being a freshman on varsity, which was a challenging experience because the coach had favorites, right? Every coach has, their favorites, but this was obvious. And so it impacted my play and my confidence a little bit. It was a little shook. I'm not going to be honest. It was. I'm still a kid, right? And so when that coach decided to retire after my junior year, going to my senior year, I went back and begged Coach Powers. I said, please apply for the job. She was like, no, thank you. I'm not interested in politics.
I'm good.
I'm good. I was like, yeah, but I'm not. So if you apply for this job and you get it, which I know you will, Coach Powers, I will get a scholarship and then I will not have to worry about my mom trying to send me to college. I'll be an example to my middle brother. I have 2 younger brothers. I'm the oldest of 2, so I'm an older sister. My middle brother, I'll be inspiration to him and, all these great things will happen. And she's like, oh my God, fine. And so she did it. The interview, Emily, and as I, God willing, she got the job. And so she came over my senior year and thanks to her, I ended up on a full ride and ended up going to college on a basketball scholarship. And that for me changed trajectory. And if it hadn't been for Coach Powers recognizing that athletic ability and seeing that in me and being the first person to actually say it to me verbally, people have to say it, right, Emily?
Yes.
If you don't, you can see it, you can feel it, but people don't say it. It's really hard to contextualize and make it, reality. That opened my mind up to possibilities. And those possibilities led to me down a road, a career that quite honestly, I didn't think I had the opportunity to do. And if it had not been for what I like to call the power of sport, pun intended.
Yes.
Coach Powers had like the best name. I don't think I'd be sitting here today and everybody would be okay with that. They would think like based on our childhood, it makes sense. that she doesn't, she's not successful. And so with that confidence and joy, I was able to accomplish great things. And I became a leader. I learned how to challenge the status quo. I learned how to change narratives. False narratives are out there, especially about non-traditional households. For me specifically, it was single parent households. Mm-hmm. Right? Everybody says you come out of a single parent household, you'll never be successful. My middle brothers, my brothers and I, we challenge that every day. Mm-hmm. We challenge and we prove it wrong every single day in all that we do. And so I think about a quote from Malcolm X that really helped shape, I think, kind of where my life was and where it is today. And he said, there is no better than adversity. Every defeat, every heartbreak, every loss contains its own seed, its own lesson on how to improve your performance next time. And for me, that applies both personally and professionally. It allowed me the opportunity to, like Shirley Chisholm, grab my folding chair, make room at the table. When there wasn't a table for me, I'm coming in, especially as a Black female executive, challenging that and making sure people understood that, the stereotype of Black women in leadership, that's false too. Another false narrative, right? So they gave me the opportunity to challenge that.
So I want to pause there because you said some really important things. So first of all, I heard, if you're a coach, if you're a leader and you see potential and raw talent in someone, speak that over them and speak that into them, because they might not know. You might be like, of course they know they're good at basketball. Of course they know they're good at leading team meetings. They might not know, and they might have a very different view and story about themselves. So someone in a leadership position speaking that over you, I think can, as you mentioned, change the trajectory of your sports career, of your professional career, and therefore of your life. So I think that's an important call out to Coach Powers. And then I think the stories we tell ourselves are so, so important, because we create our world and we create our reality. And so if you're telling yourself something, I'm bad at sports, or I'm not good enough for this team, or I don't belong here, well, that's one story. But if you flip the script on that and you said, I do add a lot of value in this team meeting, I have a seat at the table and I deserve to be here, that's a very different story. And believe you me, you show up differently when you're telling yourself that story. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure to highlight that, because I think those are important lessons and takeaways. But you mentioned a folding chair, and I love that analogy. So maybe take us into the corporate America phase of your story, which you've said you've had to recover from. So maybe tell us some stories or reasons why you had to recover from that, and how you had to grab your folding chair and take your seat at the table.
Well, I'd like to add on to what you said, though. Also, the stories, not only stories we tell ourselves, but the ones we choose to believe. Right? People are always going to tell us what they think we're capable of, and we have the choice whether or not to believe it.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure people understand that as well, because we're constantly here, we're not good enough, and that doesn't make it true. So yes, as I've stated before, I'm recovering from corporate America. Philanthropy, don't get me wrong, it was a great experience. I worked with some amazing companies, learned a lot of amazing things, got some great opportunities, met a lot of wonderful people along the way. And of course, as in every role, not so wonderful people along the way, right? But yes, after doing philanthropy for others, and their passions and what was important to them or their organizations, I felt it was time for me to really think about what was important for me and what held true to my values, especially raising my son, who's a tween, getting ready this year to be a teenager, still processing that.
Good luck. Yeah.
Thank you.
God bless you.
I will receive that. So it's just he and I, and just thinking about, looking at being, first of all, in the state of Texas, where it's quite frankly very scary. In this current environment that we're in, and think about the U.S. and what could potentially happen, what could potentially happen in this election, right? This presidential election year. Looking at my younger brothers, looking at my nephews, and thinking about my family, I was like, I have to do something that I'm passionate about. I speak on things a lot, justice and equality and females in leadership, Black women in leadership, people of color. But I didn't really have a career path that aligned with those personal values. I mean, I could find ways to put it into my corporate roles, but that's a challenge as well. And then I decided after, doing that for a while, I said, I got to make a change. My previous boss was retiring, and I was like, I'm ready to do something different. So I went out on LinkedIn and then I said, what's out here? What can I do? And I thought about, the titles I had and the roles. And I was like, chief of staff kind of makes sense. So let's see what's out there with chief of staff. And so Donors of Color Network advertised this position for chief of staff. And I thought, I can do that. I have the skills that do when I think about it. Donors of Color Network has created this home for high net worth donors with values that are rooted in joy, community, solidarity, and power. I mean, those are like 4 words that just like you feel it in your soul, like it resonates with you. And so when I thought about the mission, which is to build the collective power of donors of color to advance racial equity through cross-racial solidarity and multiracial giving, I was like, oh my gosh, it's like they are like preaching, like the light, the light opens up and you see it, right? It's glowing on you. You're like, I was born for this. So I applied for it, met the amazing executive director and amazing board members, and then got offered the position and was like, yes, and when do I start? And what do you need? And so going through that, I thought, let me think what I could bring to this role, right? Because these are amazing people, powerful in their own right. So what can I bring to this role? So I started thinking about kind of my trajectory of going through corporate America and what I've learned. And I came up with 5 descriptors, and it was very interesting when I thought about it. I was like, and they all kind of shape everything. There's this need for information for me. I'm an information junkie. I'm straight up, and it's all aspects, right? I don't discriminate when it comes to information, Emily, unless it's bad information. So, information for me drives curiosity. And when I find great information, especially in this noise of misinformation, I get really excited.
Yeah.
And so I think about how do I wield it toward a human-centered storytelling and making connections, right? And it was extremely beneficial in my role as a Thunder in corporate America to think about how to make those connections. So when I hear these different stories, I'm understanding what people are going through. I'm like, what, it'd be interesting if you dealt about this, and here's what's going on here, and you think about these things. And that was very beneficial in that role. And I think it helped to kind of cement how I approach and my perspective on things. Yeah. And I think it helped to gain some respect in that space. And I look at another space of it, of justice. So there's information, there's justice. So justice is a powerful word on its own. Is anything in front of it or behind it? And so when you think about justice, if you have quality information, you can build on that foundation of equity in any space, right? When it comes to justice. And so you use that information to benefit those you want to serve and empower them. So then you take intent. So if I'm intentional about how I use information and justice, then what can I do with that? I'd be very intentional about how I wield it and yield it, right?
I like
and
that.
Thank you. And then I flow into the wonder, right? Which comes from that childhood experience with Coach Powers, who was an amazing force in my life. And I think about its duality and definition is fascinating, because wonder is a word that doesn't really get a lot of play, but it's one of my favorites, right? You could have a wonder and feel doubt, or you could wonder and you could desire to be curious to know something. So I choose the latter, right? I choose that intentionally. And I think, what if? And then I stop right there. So I don't want somebody to go down the rabbit hole of, it won't happen if I know, what if? And I stop. And then that opens me up to my last word, which is possibility.
Yeah.
Right? So if full circle the conversation you and I had, Coach Powers gave me possibility. This is where I ended up my life. So with possibility, all 4 of those, you add them together, for me, it equals possibility. And for my life, both personally and professionally, that's the formula I use.
Wow. Yes. So take us back though to when you were going on LinkedIn and you were saying, okay, what am I about? Like, what do I want my next phase to be? And somehow you came up with chief of staff. So I'm wondering, what drew you to that role? Was there something specific when you read, oh, that's me, I'm a chief of staff, and you kind of called that in?
Yeah, actually, it was the job description, 2 things. It was the job description from Donors of Color Network. Right. So the first thing it said in there was that role needs to ensure cross-departmental team cohesion. Right. So you have that cohesion, that kind of connective tissue to strengthen and grow the organization, right? The goals of the organization. So I thought about that. I'm like, okay, there's a lot of things to unpack in that one sentence, that first statement that kind of caught me. And I said, so what part of me do I bring to something like that? Right. And so I started thinking through it. And I was like, for me, I bring to the role and understanding that work gets done by people, right? And so if I'm intentional at how I show up with and for others, then work can get done, right? But at the same time, I thought about there's another quality that I bring. And I feel as though I'm an architect of gracious spaces, right? So gracious space, not a safe space. Because in corporate America, I was triggered by safe space. I'm like, no, you don't look like me. You don't know my lived experience. This is not a safe space. You can tell me all day, it is not safe. So for me, a gracious space means that I've given an area of comfortability for you to misstep without being judged. And that opens up a different type of conversation because I'm not coming in glaring at you, waiting for you to say something. I gotcha. No, that's terrible.
That's
terrible.
not the way to go. Yeah, that doesn't get us anywhere. No.
It is. And that was corporate America. I felt like that was like the moments I had. And so when I thought about it, I was like, you know what? You have two ears and one mouth for a reason, Shantel. I think you can do this. Yeah, we listen with two ears and there's one mouth. Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. So yeah, I mean, I thought there was two things that kind of brought me to that role.
Yeah, and that's the ratio we should use, by the way. Listen twice as much as you speak, and you'll probably be on your way to good things.
Beautifully stated, Emily. Beautifully stated. So
but
true.
I think what you said is so important because it's a large topic. But when people are trying to do their best and meet you halfway, sometimes they don't do it perfectly, right? Sometimes they stumble and they're like, oh, that did not come out as gracefully as I thought, but their intent is in the right place. And I think we need to key in on that because that's how you make connections, not like you said, not the gotcha, you didn't do that perfectly right. Oh, well, you're intending to do this. I'm going to also meet you halfway. I think that's an important part of all of this as well.
Well, it is, Emily, because, we're women of color. And people of color, it's different, right? And for Black women, from my own perspective, it's always expectation over appreciation. We're expected to do things, but never appreciated, never looked at as leaders as compared to our counterparts. We're always second fiddle, never looked at those who can step into the role of leadership. So I think that's extremely important.
Yes. What do you do as chief of staff at your current role? We heard a little bit about the job description, but what are you doing today? You have some initiatives you're working on, or how do you interact with your principal? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we just came out of strategic planning last year, this has been a major experience. So we've decided, what's next for Donors of Color Network? And so my job is to really look at the 6 priorities that we've identified in the organization and think about how we carry that forward. So we've decided to be completely member focused, right? Donors of Color Network, right? High net worth individuals of color in a space of philanthropy that's white led, and that it's hard to have a seat at the table for donors of color with high net wealth. And, again, we don't have generational wealth in our communities, right? So a lot of donors are coming into this new money, right? So there's a learning curve there. And so they need a space to figure out, oh my God, people think that the rich have it easy. No one has it easy. I don't care how much money you have in the bank or what's going on. And so to create a space where there's solidarity, both in class and race, has been phenomenal. And so I help and assist our executive director in creating that space, not only for our donors, but for our staff, right? And what does that look like when we sit in that power and then we take that power into the spaces of philanthropy and we change that dynamic and we challenge systemic racism and equity and justice? And then what does it look like when we take it out into the political world, right? So we have a C3 and a C4. And so how do we challenge all the things that are out there? How do we show up? And so that's the work I get to do every day. And I pinch myself every day and they pay me. Yes.
Well, it sounds like the theme words you had before come into play when you're holding a space and allowing the staff to be in that space, and then it exudes from them into anything they're doing, which is, to me, sounds like exactly the job of a chief of staff. You are taking care of the staff, both tactically and what they need and the tools and resources, but also getting them in the right headspace and getting them in the right emotional space to go and do what they need to do at their very best.
Exactly. I'm there to listen, learn, advocate, and then find the resources needed to get the work done.
So most of our guests to date have been from for-profit companies. And I was just interested, so your principal is the executive director. Yes. And then what would be the equivalent of like the C-suite or the leadership team that you also work with?
So they'll be directors, right? So we have a director of membership. We're looking at directors of communication, and then my ED's role. So there's only 11 of us on staff. I know what I talked about. It feels like there's like 200 of us on staff doing this amazing work, but it's a network, right? So you don't need a staff of 200, right? You lean on the power of the network, which are those members that are out there in these spaces every day.
Okay.
And so thinking about my role as chief of staff, yes, support staff, but also support this member network, Emily, and this powerhouse of individuals that are out there doing this work and creating like, what are the resources they need, right? So I get to bring that philanthropic experience I've had, for over 25 years in corporate America, to bring that to this space as well. And I think the great and amazing part of this role is I get to bring every aspect of myself, both personally and professionally, into this space, which I have never been able to do that openly, invited to do it. I do it anyway, but the space is not created that way. But I'm like, yeah, I'm doing it anyway. I'm not here to make you feel comfortable. That's not my job. I don't get paid. Last time I checked the job description, to say I'm here to make you feel comfortable. It does not say that. So yeah, it's been a phenomenal journey, and I'm super excited to see what we're going to do next.
And I think that's a takeaway for any role, right? How close is it to, first of all, using all of your talents in the fullest way? Because I think when we're doing that, and especially when we're being stretched and challenged, like, oh, I don't know if I can do that, but let me step up into it. If we're in that space, oh my gosh, that's a golden space. That's when we can thrive. That's when we can prove to ourselves that, oh, I didn't think I could do that, but yet I just did. And so you take those steps forward. Now, I'm just curious, do you, what's your split between working with members and then working internally with directors? Is that a pretty even split, or is there kind of a slant one way?
No, there's a slant right now. I'm mainly internal because we're doing strategic planning, right? We're coming out and implementing a strategic plan. So yeah, I would say it's probably about 80% internal right now, focused on making sure to build up that infrastructure. And then the remaining 20% is external. I'm sure there'll be a shift once we've built that out and started to really empower everybody to move the strategic plan forward. Then I'll probably see more of an even split.
And how much influence or involvement do you have with the strategic plan? Is that you and the ED speaking about it, and then getting the rest of the directors involved? Is that a big group conversation? What does that look like?
Oh, it's all in. It's all hands on deck, Emily. It is like everyone on the team has a part in this nested strategic plan project. So like everybody on the team has, like you just, there's 11 of us, right? So everybody has a critical role in making sure that, and our job as staff is to focus on the members and make sure that we're doing what they need in order to feel empowered to change the dynamic. But also we're having to make sure that we are staying true to the mission and vision of Donors of Color Network, right? What it was intended to do.
And how much of your job is, I think about culture, and you have described a very strong culture, a very clear culture about what the organization is about. And I'm wondering, when you bring new folks on, or when you're even speaking with members and telling them about the organization and the mission, is that something where you try to make that a match? Meaning, oh, I'm bringing on this director, I want to make sure they're a good cultural fit in that sense.
Absolutely. I mean, I think org culture, and you probably know this just as well as anybody else, is extremely important, right? And you don't want to disrupt that org culture, by bringing in someone that doesn't really understand or is not willing to understand it, right? I'm open to giving anybody the opportunity to be open to understanding it, but when you're not willing, that's a whole nother thing that we just don't have the time to invest in, unfortunately. But yeah, I think it's very org culture. It's extremely important, and right now we're building that out. I mean, Donors of Color Network is still a startup. It's very entrepreneurial. We've only been around for about 5 years. 5 years. We'll be celebrating 5 years next year. So you think about that.
That's new.
I mean, yeah, that's new, right?
Baby
it is, and it's incredible to be working with this team to build out what that will be. To lay that foundation.
Yes. And I think especially at that stage, having a fit of mission is so important. Because if you have 11 people and you have one person who's going this way and everyone else is going that way, that stands out. That's weighted even more heavily. So, and I know that I have a lot of chiefs of staff who, maybe are at a larger company, but they have certain folks here, maybe in key leadership positions or even middle management positions, who aren't quite on board with the way we want to do things and the mission and the values and the integrity and all of those things. So sometimes chiefs of staff have to have these conversations to kind of bring people. It's like, I'm not trying to tell you exactly what to do and how to do it, but we all need to be thematically and directionally going in this direction.
Mm.
And it's interesting to kind of, you're always kind of nudging things here and there to make sure the team as a whole is generally going in the right direction. So I'm wondering, if someone's listening and saying, yeah, I kind of have like a culture fit problem with these like two people over here, what would you suggest in terms of having those conversations?
Oh gosh, that is a hard question. Well, especially because the dynamic is different in a small
Right.
environment versus corporate, right? Corporate, you're dealing with way more bureaucracy, and unfortunately, you're dealing with different leadership perspectives and accountability perspectives.
Yeah.
So it is extremely more challenging. But what I would say to that person is figure out how to advocate for what it is you're trying to accomplish and keep it from being personal, right? Always stay in the facts of the mission of the organization and how it impacts the organization and those you're trying to serve, meaning your clients or whomever that may be. Stay focused in that space. And that's how you create your argument. Because once you make it personal, people shut down and it becomes extremely challenging to move anybody forward after you open that up.
Once you make it's you versus me, then shields go up, and that's really hard to break through. So yes, I think
Absolutely.
I always try, and I always tell people, have it be an us thing. Like, we're in this together. We want to make sure our customers, our members are taken care of. We want to make sure our team has the best. And so let's talk about
Right.
this one area together. And
And more often than not, our paychecks have the same company name on it. So,
yep.
we're all trying
Let's
to
make
figure
this work. Let's make this happen.
We're all trying to figure this out together. You know what? I like my bonuses. You like your bonuses? Okay, great.
Let's do this.
Well, how do we continue to get these bonuses?
Love it. Yeah, I see people going in there and they're almost like guns blazing. Like, I gotta entrench myself and dig my heels in. I'm like, that's one way to approach it, but maybe not the most fruitful to get what you actually want, which is moving forward and consensus. So if a chief of staff is listening, or someone is listening, and they've kind of wanted to break into a nonprofit or a cause they are truly passionate about that really represents all of who they are, and they're in corporate right now, what suggestions would you make? Would you say chief of staff is a great way to come into an organization? Would you say, go in as a volunteer? What advice would you have for people doing that path?
I would actually say to take a moment to self-reflect, which is what I did, right? So when I decided to make the change and to recover and purge myself with corporate America space, I sat down, Emily, and I made a list of 6 things, right? The 6 being aspirational that I wanted in my next role. I didn't do it by title. I didn't do it by nonprofit versus for-profit. I just said, this is what I want to do, right? These 5 with a 6 aspirational. Thankfully, I was able to find a job that checked all 6 boxes, including the aspirational. Wow. But I say that's a moment of introspection, like go inside, like look at where you are in your life and figure out what it is you need, in your next personal, professional journey before you make those decisions. I think we don't give ourselves enough time to reflect because we're always thinking, I have to get this paycheck. I have to this. Yeah, I have to insurance. I have to, we're going down the doubt side of wonder. Let's stop that. So I would say, check your doubt at the door before you sit down and make this list and leave it open to any possibility. Because I think we as humans, especially as women, tend to limit ourselves, right? Women are the ones that won't apply for jobs because they don't check every box on a job description. They're like, oh, I can't do that. Stop doing it. Think about how whatever skills you acquired, whether in your personal or professional life, over your lifetime, think how you take those skills into whatever role it is you want to do next. Don't think about it as a list of just think about the skills, not the list of things they need, but what are the skill sets it takes to accomplish the things that this job description is asking for.
Yes. Yes. I love that. And I also think, similar to you, I was in corporate America and I had great interactions and great relationships and I worked with great teams. And so I want to make sure I put that out there. But there was this rising sense in me of, purpose, fulfillment. I can stay on this track or I can go all in on coaching and take a gamble on this. And even though that was scary, because look, I liked a predictable paycheck as well, and I liked benefits and I liked all these things, it was, you know, in 10, 15, 20 years, what am I going
Mm.
to look at and say, oh, I was proud that I made that decision? And when I took a moment of reflection, and I remember this, I wrote stuff down similar to you, I came across this thought of when I'm older and I'm doing the rocking chair tests, on the porch, I would regret not trying. Even if I quote unquote failed, I would regret more not trying. And as scary as it was to take a leap of faith and jump into like, I don't know how to be an entrepreneur, but here we go. I would regret more sitting there and saying, oh, what if? And I don't know for sure. And I ran out of time. Oh, when I came across that, I was like, boom, we're doing this. I don't know how, but we're doing this. So,
Well,
um,
I think you probably in that image, there's two things I go back to. Did you find your tribes? I think you have to find your tribe, right? There's this tribe of people around you, ecosystem that you don't realize sometimes that you lean on. And I think you need to find that tribe to give you the real talk, right? About
I
what it
I did.
is.
So that's
Okay.
interesting because I was doing my corporate job and then on evenings and weekends I would go to coach training
Mhm.
like the ICA. And the first class I had, we had this great instructor called Mercy Maglino, and then we had this cohort of new coaches, and I literally was like, these are my people. Like,
Yeah.
these are my people. Like, this is amazing. And it was coaches from all over the world. And I just got this infusion of energy. And so I said, yes, okay, this is a confirming data point that I've made the right decision. And it encouraged me to continue on that path.
Well, what about your power sport journey? Did that help in, giving you the resilience and the belief in yourself as
Yes, so
well?
I wasn't good enough to get a scholarship, but I did play basketball and soccer. And I learned a lot from that. I learned a lot about operating in a team, about winning, about losing, about what it truly means to be a champion. And that's not when you're on the podium. That is when you've lost and you're in that moment of like despair. I learned a lot about leadership from good coaches and coaches who had a different style. We'll say it that way. So I bring a lot of that to what I do in business. But I will say that I'm competitive, and I probably am competitive by nature, and kind of sports was a place to express that. But I am competitive in business, and sometimes that's a good thing because it propels me, and sometimes it's oh, I need to check that because it's not you against me. It's like, let's win this game together. So I got to kind of define my teams and winning in new ways sometimes. But yes, sports had a huge impact on my view of the world.
Great advice. Great
Yeah.
advice.
Yeah. What other advice would you have for chiefs of staff? Is there anything in terms of, making sure that you're keeping yourself straight and true to what you want to be and show up as? Is there, time management is a huge question I always get. I got 24 things, Emily. How do I keep track of these? What tips and
Yeah.
tricks would you have for chiefs of staff?
So here's the most basic knowledge that I have, especially if you're a person of color, and triple, especially if you're a woman of color.
Tripoli, especially.
Triple, especially, Emily. That may not be a term, but it will be after this. I need you, and I'm talking directly to all of you. I need you to check your humanity. You are human. You cannot be all things to all people, and you cannot accomplish all things. You need to learn a couple of things. You need to learn when to say no, and you need to learn when to say not right now. And you need to be okay saying it. You also need to acknowledge and verbalize that it's okay not to be okay. It's okay. Stop living to the stigma that you have to be rock solid and you always have to be okay. It's not realistic. So stop doing it. The last thing I would say to you is find your moments of self-care. Whatever that is for you, make it a priority to have your moments to take care of you, because you know what? You can't take care of others if you're not taking care of yourself. So take those moments, take a beat, and don't feel guilty doing it.
It's
I
not
mean, my
selfish.
I get mani pedis. Like, I'm like, you're going to learn how to take care of yourself, especially being a person of color, because we're not typically, in our DNA, we're like, fight.
We have to prove it. We have to work harder.
Battle scars are great. No, they're not. They are not great. I have scars. They're not great. So stop telling ourselves these false narratives, and then take pride in taking care of you. That's what I would say. That's if I said, and stop looking at it from business perspective 24/7. Yeah. Start going human-centered. And what does that look like as you, the human?
I like that. It's not selfish. I mean, self-care, like, I can't do that. It's not selfish.
It's not.
It's good leadership. And there's a huge ocean between self-care and being lazy, which people like fuse together. It's like, no. Like, hold on, there's self-care. And then, yes, if you're sitting on the couch watching Netflix for 20 hours a day, that's a different thing. That's not self-care.
Unless it's a long weekend.
Sometimes Netflix binging is the thing to do, like active rest once, a quarter, every other month, whatever. You got watch a big project. Yeah.
It is. But if you're doing, to your point, if you're doing it every day.
Not every day, but once in a while.
Then we have a problem. You made an intervention. But if that's the case, it's okay sometimes.
But you know what we're talking about. So yes, so take care of yourself, because you have great teams and great people to influence and lead and speak, vision over people like Coach Powers and others that we have in our lives. So with that, thank you, Shantel. Thank you so much for being on Leveraging Leadership. I really have appreciated this conversation, and I appreciate what you're doing. And hopefully we can continue this conversation as we go along in our journeys.
Absolutely, Emily. I appreciate you. It has been wonderful to get to know you, and I appreciate this opportunity to share my journey.
Thank you so much.
Help us in our mission to cultivate and promote exceptional leadership. A simple like or share of this episode can go a long way. Emily, me the British guy, and the United Kingdom extend its gratitude.